weekend, I asked for your Spider-Man hot takes, your most controversial opinions, and you shared 805 flaming hot takes. I read through every single one of them. Now I'm going to react to the hottest of the hot. Let's fight. First up, The Amazing Spider-Man 2 is amazing. The ending is a masterpiece.
Masterpiece!
There was a lot of love for The Amazing Spider-Man 2 in the comment section. And there's a lot of people that watch it and just absolutely adore so much about it. In the case of this post, literally called the ending a masterpiece. And honestly, I can see why you would love the end of this movie. That with what it does with Gwen and how that kind of plays out, I could see why that would be something that would be very moving for you and what its implications are. What's fascinating about this is that they shot scenes with Shailene Woodley as MJ to be a part of the epilogue to the story. After Gwen dies, then you have Peter Parker hanging out with Shailene Woodley, kind of part of his journey moving on. And they went, this is probably not a great idea. So I'm wondering, how would the ending play if you throw MJ into it? Is it still a masterpiece for you? Or is it like, wow, that was a bad idea? All right, next one on here, kind of in the same theme. The Amazing Spider-Man 2 has some of the best Spidey moments in any of the films. The plot just wasn't there. And I would essentially say that that's probably not a hot take at all. I don't think that's really a hot take because I think most of that is true. The individual moments in this film are great. The next comment on here, Gwen Stacy's death in The Amazing Spider-Man 2 is the best singular scene in all of the Spider-Man movies. That might be true. It is an incredibly effective scene and sequence, both in how her death plays out, Spider-Man's desperate attempt to save her, the desperation in her eyes, the actual shot of the moment that she is destroyed, broken, and killed, and then Andrew Garfield's performance afterwards is fantastic. It just happens to be in a movie that is not fantastic. And that's what makes this movie one that I think can be really polarizing, where a lot of people are like, that movie's a mess, and a bunch of people love it and call elements of it a masterpiece. Because there's so many things that are so good in a movie where the plot just doesn't really come together. The Amazing Spider-Man 2 is one of my favorite movies. And then here's one from Film Speak, good friend of the channel. Outside of Across the Spider-Verse, The Amazing Spider-Man 2 is my favorite Spider-Man movie. Which is fascinating because for so many people, we have it at the bottom. But in the case of this movie, I really do kind of get it. There's some great themes about what's going on with Peter Parker and his relationship with Gwen. Of course, there's some fantastic scenes as we just talked about. Like, I think I can understand why someone could watch this, and if the pieces pull together for you, it is amazing. For a lot of us, it's just too scattershot. It's too many things. Tonally, it's a little bit too all over the place. And that's what we see. And that kind of covers up the bad stuff on the inside. Now, if you want to see somebody do a great job defending The Amazing Spider-Man 2, check out Film Speak's video specifically on this movie where he calls it his favorite. He's a lot smarter than me, so he's going to make a compelling argument for why a movie that is many people's least favorite Spider-Man movie is actually his favorite. All right, moving right along, kind of in the same category as these ones. Andrew Garfield and Emma Stone are the best on-screen Spider-Man couple. This is not a hot take. This is just facts. Anyone disagreeing that Andrew Garfield and Emma Stone are the best? Anyone disagreeing with that? I think Smash Mouth has some solid life advice for you. Put away the crack before the crack put you away. Okay, maybe that was a little overstated, but honestly, I think their on-screen chemistry is just off the charts. I think as actors, they're phenomenal. And so that is just the best aspect of both of the Amazing Spider-Man films to me. And I think that they're truly phenomenal. I'd love it if they did more movies together. And it's unfortunate that that relationship is put in two movies that I don't think are top tier Spider-Man films. No joke, I think Morbius is actually a good movie, better than half of the MCU. Despite all of the problems that the Morbius film has, it's fun, gothic thriller and a compelling tale of friendship between two old friends falling apart. I think that this is a movie that, depending on your personal taste, it probably can work a lot better for you. I think its faults are pretty obvious, that it kind of had a bit of a troubled production in post where it just got reworked a little bit too much and kind of got lost.
This is a mess. None of these storylines make any sense.
Even one of the actors in the film openly said that. The director has implied it, that they lost control and too many people were messing with it in the editing bay. But like, if you want like a gothic thriller, if you want a throwback comic book movie, it's delivering something that other comic book movies aren't really delivering. Morbius is a good movie. Reminds me of the early 2000s superhero films that I grew up on. Cheesy and fun. And I think that's where it's kind of that personal taste thing. That superhero movies these days become kind of these big, gigantic stories where so many are multiverse, massive in scale, and it's just kind of this escalation of size. And then you watch Morbius and it's like, yeah, it's kind of like the ones from 15, 16, 17 years ago. And if you grew up on those movies, if you grew up on that kind of scale size, there's something about it that it's a nice return to something of the past. And I can appreciate that. I can hear that and go, yeah, I kind of dug that about the movie. I think it's a train wreck, but I can see what you're saying there. As someone who didn't grow up with the Raimi films, I don't think they are as amazing as everyone says.
I think that that's a matter of opinion.
I am not a fan of the Raimi trilogy. I think it's very overrated. I think The Amazing Spider-Man 2 is better than all three of them. I find the trilogy hard to watch.
Yeah, well, that's just like your opinion, man.
Sam Raimi's trilogy sucks.
How dare you?
I feel like when it comes to the Raimi films, there's like a generational gap. People that grew up on the Raimi films, they love them. There's a special place in their heart. They're emotional. They're groundbreaking, classic version of the story. They love them. People that didn't grow up with them go, you guys just liked it because of nostalgia. Which, if someone tries to dismiss your opinion, why you love something, or you just like it because of nostalgia, normally doesn't go all that well. No, I think it's really well made. And sure, it was from my childhood, but it was groundbreaking and made $1 bazillion, and we loved it at the time for a reason. We didn't love it at the time for nostalgia. We loved it because it was great. I really think there's a little bit of like that. If you were there, there was a point in time where we didn't have a comic book movie coming out every 2 weeks. We got a superhero movie like every 2 years, and they were still trying to figure out how to do it right. And then they cracked the code and made a movie that had emotion and character arcs, but it also had big action and it had humor. It could be silly, but it could be heartfelt. They figured out the code. And that laid the foundation for all of the movies that have come. The MCU doesn't exist without Sam Raimi's Spider-Man. And if you weren't there, if you didn't experience that, then you can just look back and be like, these feel dated. These feel like a product of a different time. The acting is goofy. The humor is corny. I don't like the Sam Raimi weirdness. Some of that's fair. I think there's a difference between saying, hey, it's just not for my time. I don't get it. But dismissing it, trying to dismiss people's opinions, that's where I'm like, let's have reasonable arguments and discussion. Here's the hottest take of the day because it's the angriest take of the day. Are you effing dumb or just blinded by nostalgia? You refuse to admit that Across the Spider-Verse is better than Spider-Man 2002 just because you grew up with it. Like, bro, Across the Spider-Verse is probably one of the greatest films of all time. Have you even effing watched it, or are you just stupid?
That escalated quickly.
Woo! That is someone with some passion right there. First off, the movie just came out this weekend, declaring it the best ever, greatest film of all time. That's called recency bias. Like, hey, I'm not saying you can't praise it. I got it as my #1 movie of the year, but like declaring it one of the greatest films of all time without giving it time to breathe. Come on now, we're getting a little bit carried away with this, especially while you're claiming nostalgia bias on someone else for a movie they've had in their life for 19 years. And you're claiming the last movie that you watched is the best movie you've ever seen. You've seen it one time and you declared it the best movie you've ever seen. That's called recency bias. Second, I didn't grow up with Spider-Man 2002. I was a grown-up when it came out. But one little detail I thought I'd look in. Anytime someone gets super aggressive, I like to look at their profile. So I looked this guy up. I'm 15. I have been watching Spider-Man 2002 since 6 years before this guy was born. That is hilarious. Hey, real quick, I got a number of people with comments. No Way Home sucks. No Way Home is overrated. I'm not going to talk about that in this video because just a couple weeks back in an MCU video, I tackled that exact thing in this exact type of video, literally just last month. You can check that out right up here when this video is over with. Emo Peter Parker is the best thing in the Sam Raimi trilogy. My best friends and I have so much fun reenacting the scenes, and it has left more of an impact on me than anything else. My 11-year-old is in the exact same camp as you. He loves Spider-Man 3 for that reason. He loves to do the emo Peter Parker dance. So I get where you're coming from. Emo Peter Parker is honestly a really fun thing to watch on screen and something I could easily watch on loop forever. I mean, it has become legendary on the internet with meme culture. So I don't know. You might not be wrong about that. It does make a mark. And if one of the most important things that you can do with a movie is do something that catches people's attention, that gets them talking, what's the thing that's gotten people talking the most in those movies? Maybe you're onto something.
And I did this. We don't really talk about this.
Then we have Jedi Pastor Aaron. The walk and dance that Peter does in Spider-Man 3 is exactly how a dork would act if he lost all inhibitions. No matter what anyone says, it was spot on. I see what you're saying. Like, I get where you're going with this. On the one hand, I can see what you're saying. Like, there's some truth to that. That doesn't mean that it doesn't play out really weird in the movie. And it doesn't get like so overcooked and overplayed in a way that just, it pulls you out of the movie because it's played with the music. And there's like the scene in the nightclub where he's like, now dig on this. And the way that it cuts and he's like snapping. And when you have movies that kind of have a certain timelessness to them and the way that high schools is treated, and besides the music cues, which are extraordinarily pointed. And they say that a hero can save us. Vindicated, I am selfish, I am wrong. Besides that, they're not movies that are like specifically tied to a time. You don't have a bunch of people dressed in emo in these movies that you're seeing him like, they're cool, I wish I could pull that off. And then all of a sudden he's got that very specific haircut and the specific makeup that's tied to a culture that's not otherwise in these movies. It just stands out. It's weird. I think that's why people make fun of it. The basic idea of him being inhibited as a dork, you're right. Finally, we got some Across the Spider-Verse hot takes. Obviously, the movie has gotten fantastic reviews. It has a fantastic cinema score. It's making $1 bazillion. And so it was like second best preview screenings ever for an animated film. Fantastic, fantastic opening weekend. What did someone have to say about that? Embarrassing box office earnings for an incomplete movie. Can't believe I wasted 2 hours for it to say to be continued.
Worst ending ever.
Like, honestly, I don't have the patience to sit through grainy, staggered movie like this just to get no answer. Worst movie I've seen in my whole life. We kind of admitted the problem here is that you're impatient, that you can't deal with a hard cliffhanger, a part 1 of 2. But the idea that it's the worst movie ever made while being groundbreaking as animation, bold.
Why would you say something so controversial yet so brave?
Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse wouldn't be nearly as well received if it wasn't for all the Easter eggs fan service. But there are other movies that have done fan service and haven't been well received. There's other movies that have done multiverse crossovers that haven't been as well received. So to pinpoint is just that, I think, overly simplifies things to where it's a movie that people watched it and they had a compelling story that justified the fan service. The plot integrated multiverse. That's the plot. It's not just there's a cheap gimmick, so now people are showing up. It's literally the setup and everything. Is it bad that there's a movie that works and the fan service is just integrated into the whole thing? I don't think that's a bad thing. I mean, I think the third act of Endgame is fan service. What's wrong with serving the fans? What's the wrong with having us building a story, earning the right to do big payoff, earning the right to do multiverse, earning the right to bring all of your toys into the one little playground in one scene in a movie? Like, they earned it, whether in Endgame, they earned it in here. So I don't think it's a bad thing. And I don't think criticizing and trying to write off people liking it isn't entirely fair. Across the Spider-Verse is a 7 out of 10 film. It's beautiful and engaging, but for God's sake, it's literally doesn't have an ending.
Not impressed.
I disagree with your score and how much it hurts the film, but I agree with the sentiment. There's different types of cliffhangers. Like, Infinity War is a cliffhanger, but it tells a complete story. It's the story of the Infinity Stones. Who will get the Infinity Stones? It was Thanos. Oh, crap. People are dying. But cliffhanger, we know there's more. We know there's a part 2. We know we're going to try and undo this ending, but that's a complete story. This one, as you're watching it, it feels like we're about to go into the third act. We feel like we're about to go into the big climax of the movie, and then it says to be continued. It is not the completion of a story. You can say it's the completion of Gwen's arc, that there's a change in her. That's complete. But the story, it just cuts off hard. And even knowing it's a part 1 of 2, it's reasonable that someone would want a story that feels complete. That this actually feels like closing out a chapter, feels like this journey is done, and now we have to resolve the aftermath of this journey, the consequences of this one. I think that's reasonable for people to want that. Like, I've seen a lot of people on Twitter like, do you not know what a cliffhanger is? Did you not know it was part 1 of 2? Come on now. Come on. Literally, it's building up to a climax and just says to be continued. No resolution on the plot threads. Character arc, one of them, sure. Plot threads, no. It does not. It just ends. There's a reason people are annoyed by that. And the final one on here, Across the Spider-Verse, was a major disappointment. I think it's easily not as good or as fun as the first one. It's overly melancholy, mixed bag. Some scenes are so unnecessarily dragged out. The focus is more on showing off the animation than having a compelling exchange. I would even go so far as to say some of the animation styles being mixed together straight up looks ugly sometimes.
Really?
Well, agree to disagree.
I mean, I would disagree with all of this, but I think that's what happens anytime you do something that is so wildly different, so wildly ambitious, where you're like, we're going to bring in all these animation styles. We're going to try and communicate emotion through the animation, through the backdrops with bleeding backgrounds. We're going to try and make an animated epic that's the longest wide released animated film in Hollywood history. We're going to go for it. And as soon as you do that, immediately, some people are going to go, I don't know. I don't think that works. It's spicy food. That my wife doesn't eat any spicy food. She doesn't enjoy any spicy food. It doesn't mean spicy food is bad, but she eats it, and this is gross. This is bad. Because she doesn't like spicy stuff. She doesn't like her food to be hot in her mouth. But that doesn't mean that it's objectively bad. Likewise, there's a bunch of stuff in this movie that there's a tone to it that is very heavy. There's all sorts of very clear, distinct animation things that won't work for some people watching. Oh, that's too weird, too ugly, too whatever. And everyone else, most other people go, that was incredible. I've never seen that before. I loved that. It's kind of like spicy food. The people that love it. They're all in. And others are like, what is this? Why is it taking so long? Why does it look so weird? Why is there so much stuff happening? Too overloaded. I kind of put it in that category. And in the case of this one, it seems like spicy food that most people are into. But then there's a group of people that kind of go, no, man, no, this is too bonkers. This is too weird, too hard of a cutoff. I'm not terribly surprised by that. I watched the movie and I went, I love this. I will not be surprised if a bunch of people much prefer Into the Spider-Verse for its simplicity, for it does multiverse, but it doesn't go too far. It has creative animation, but it's not doing every trick. I won't be surprised by it. And I said that in my review. And I think we're already seeing that. A lot of people are going, this one is just too much. It's too far on every level. So I get it. I disagree. But I can definitely see where this movie would be too much for a lot of people. If you enjoyed this video, I've got several other of these hot take videos, let's fight videos where I react to your hot takes, controversial opinions. You can check them out right over. Just go over to the playlist. Just watch the playlist. Thank you so much for watching. Keep talking movies and TV too much. Bye-bye.